This moment was not anticipated by anyone. A 20-year-old Filipino who grew up on Mallorcan clay courts entered one of the most exclusive tennis circles, and the entire event was captured on tape. Through a former coach, Eala came into contact with the world of Federer, not only his legacy or the philosophy of his academy, but also the living, breathing orbit of the greatest player the game has ever produced. And what transpired in that chamber on that court, in that area that very few people ever get to visit on Earth, was the kind of scene that makes everyone stop cold. This was something far more genuine, raw, and important for the future of women's tennis than anyone in that room realized at the time, since it wasn't arranged for public consumption, a press conference, a brand launch, or a red carpet moment. You must go back to the beginning of Eala's narrative to comprehend why this incident struck so differently, why it held such weight, and why the tennis world couldn't stop talking about it. Because a young girl from Quezon City spent years silently working toward this moment. It didn't just happen. You're going to learn the backstory of the scene that the camera captured and all of its implications, so fasten your seatbelt. She is an extremely skilled tennis player. Gets the ball early, rips, and goes for her shots. Being a lefty is always challenging and fiercely competitive. She has undoubtedly defeated numerous elite players this week. She doesn't really need me to remind her that she's a fantastic player and that we will undoubtedly see more of her. Every great narrative begins in an everyday place. When Eala was 4 years old, it all began on a tennis court in the Philippines. A small child swinging at a ball that nearly matched her size. The story that followed would not have been written by anyone at that time. Nobody could have imagined that the same young child would eventually enter a select group of people known as the sports royalty, such as Federer, Nadal, and Sampras. Eala started playing tennis at an early age. In 2018, at the age of 12, she won the prestigious Les Petits Aces competition, becoming her first significant accomplishment. She enrolled in the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, that same year. She left the Philippines at the age of 12 and relocated to Spain, a different continent, a different language, and a new universe, in order to pursue something that most people in her immediate vicinity were still unable to fully comprehend. However, both her family and Rafa Nadal's academy witnessed it. And this is where the Federer link starts, quietly, undetectably, long before anyone noticed. Rafael Nadal established the Rafa Nadal Academy in 2016, with Tony Nadal, his uncle and longtime coach, acting as its first director. Coaches at the school strive to maximize each player's strengths through a complex system created by the technical team. The academy provides training for both youngsters and adults, emphasizing a unique approach based on values inspired by Rafa Nadal. This is the remarkable irony that permeates Eala's narrative. Though Nadal created the academy that molded her, and Federer's world was completely dominated by the man who would later come into her public life. In a recent podcast interview, Eala talked about her time at the Rafa Nadal Academy. She disclosed that her initial encounter with Rafael Nadal took place at an airport rather than within the academy. My brother, parents, and I took a plane to get there. We chanced to go past Rafa on our way to his academy at the Madrid airport. We all went after him. Can we snap a picture when we visit your academy? Yes, he did take a picture with us. One of the most exquisitely human moments in contemporary tennis is when a 12-year-old Filipina girl and her family chase a 22-time Grand Slam champion through an airport for a photo. It is the story of the beginning, the time before everything changed. She would graduate from the same academy 5 years later. It's interesting to note that Iga Swiatek, her opponent in the Miami Open quarterfinals in 2025, stood next to her during the graduation ceremony. The 5-time major winner had no idea that Eala would defeat her and prevent her from making it to a WTA 1000 semifinal. At the age of 20, the girl who had pursued Rafa through an airport at the age of 12 was now defeating Grand Slam champions, and the man who would publicly introduce her to the Federer universe was witnessing every second of it. There are specific times in a young player's career that indicate a change in perception as well as in performance. The moment when those who have witnessed everything, guided everyone, and dedicated their lives to the sport turn to one another in silence and declare, "This one is different." That moment for Eala was made public in March 2026, just before she made her debut at the BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells, one of the most famous tennis tournaments on the calendar and frequently referred to as the fifth Grand Slam. Roger Federer's legacy was the source of the voice that gave it. On Tennis Channel Live, Paul Annacone, a former world number 12 who coached 20-time Grand Slam champion Roger Federer and 14-time major winner Pete Sampras, gave Eala some of the best compliments she had ever heard from a person of his caliber. Take a moment to consider that lineage. This is the man who stood in Roger Federer's box throughout some of the most significant matches in the greatest tennis career in history and who coached Pete Sampras during the height of his supremacy. The tennis community pays attention when Paul Annacone determines a player is worthy of discussion. Eala was praised by Annacone, who said, "She has a smile that lights up a room. She defeated IGA Swiatek last year, and I recall how gracefully and humbly she achieved it. Because I enjoy her style of play, I thought it was fantastic to watch her win that match, and then watch her play and attempt to get better." The words grace and humility were not used carelessly by the man who trained Roger Federer, who is considered by many to be not only the best tennis player, but also the most elegant representative of the sport. They were precise, purposeful, and a signal. Annacone went one step farther and noted Eala's unique technical attributes. She obviously wants to improve from her current position of 32 in the world, but she has excellent hand-eye coordination and the capacity to take the ball early and reroute. The line that struck a chord then appeared. Most. Regarding the Eala's fan base, Annacone said, "I always enjoy the fan stuff because when you see players from smaller countries, the fans are so passionate when they get to the top." From Federer's former coach, who witnessed the Swiss maestro become the most adored player in the sport's history and who, more than anyone else, knew what it meant to be a player who transcends the sport and becomes a cultural phenomenon. Federer himself had been that player, the one whose supporters not only cheered but sobbed, the one who made entire countries feel represented on a tennis court, so that comment about A-list fans had deep significance. And now, ahead of her Indian Wells debut, the man who was intimately familiar with Federer's world was painting Eala with the same special brush. Are you starting to feel the burden of what was developing? Because this moment, this public blessing from Federer's orbit, was the only reason the scene the cameras eventually captured was conceivable. And nobody in the room was completely ready for what would happen when Eala entered that private area. This is the portion of the narrative that caused the internet to go into complete overdrive. No one outside of a select group of tennis insiders had any reason to anticipate the scene that was captured on tape. Eala had a unique opportunity in late 2025 when she had a hitting session with Rafael Nadal. The Filipina has been honing her skills at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca for a number of years.
Take a time to let that land.
A hitting session with Rafael Nadal, who had recently retired from professional tennis following a 20-year career that included 22 Grand Slam victories and a legacy that changed the game as a whole. Then he made the decision to hit with Eala in private, away from the public eye on court. For the first time, Eala described that event during her post-match press conference at the Abu Dhabi Open in early 2026. "It was insane. I was anxious because it was my first time playing with him. Even though he hadn't played tennis in a year, it was physically taxing. Simply put, it's amazing that I practiced with Rafa. I consider myself extremely fortunate and fortunate. The anxiety, the physical strain, the incredulity." This 20-year-old woman, who was ranked in the top 30 worldwide, had already defeated 2 Grand Slam champions as a wild card, been on the cover of Vogue Philippines, and was still anxious to share a court with Rafael Nadal. That sums up the kind of place this was, a rarefied, elite setting that very few people have ever been invited into in the history of the sport. But the hitting wasn't the only thing that was important. Eala disclosed that during the session, Nadal had conversations with her that went beyond tennis. "He gave me some excellent advice, saying that it's crucial to surround yourself with positive people. He also shared additional details about my game with me.
I was extremely amazed by that.
Be in the company of good people." That advice, which came from a man whose inner circle included Tony Nadal as a lifelong mentor, Roger Federer as a rival-turned-friend, and a team that built one of the greatest athletic careers in human history, was personal, biographical, and given especially to Alex Eala in a private, exclusive setting that the cameras could only partially capture. Link this to the Federer topic now. The universe of the Laver Cup, which Federer co-founded with his management firm Team 8, was now inextricably linked to Eala's narrative. In the meantime, another young rising star, Juan Fonseca, 18, was representing the on-running brand, which Federer co-owns. Federer is renowned for spotting and developing up-and-coming talent through the brand. The tennis world is watching and asking the same question about two rising stars, two great mentors, one created by Nadal's academy and one circling Federer's brand universe. Which of these young athletes would eventually be responsible for the future of the sport? Every time Alex Eala set foot on a court, the answers seemed to be written all over her face, at least for the time being. The tennis community's response was swift, intense, and overwhelming when the pictures and stories from that private hitting session started to make the rounds, along with Paul Anicone's public endorsement and the news that Eala was training Nadal against the backdrop of her Indian Wells debut. Eala, a southpaw from Quezon City, will make her main draw debut this week in tennis paradise, and she will undoubtedly have the backing of her many devoted admirers, according to the official website of the BNP Paribas Open, which called her one of tennis's most delightfully unkept secrets. One of the best-kept secrets in tennis. In the Philippines and around the world, the slogan went viral on social media, because it was both perfect and painful. The world suddenly realized it had been sleeping on something spectacular when a 20-year-old who had been quietly building toward greatness for almost 10 years finally stepped onto the biggest stages the sport had to offer. On Tennis Channel, former world number 18 Alison Riske-Amritraj was asked whether she could think of a female athlete who always gets the same kind of support as Eala. Her response was instructive. Though clearly not to this degree, I would have to argue that Alex Eala has a considerably higher ceiling than Sonia Mirza in her prime. Alex Eala's potential is far higher. That was a verdict, not a compliment from a former professional who had faced the greatest in the world. The comparison that actually caused them to stop scrolling then appeared. Eala's immense popularity was compared by a prominent tennis voice to Taylor Swift, the world's most culturally dominant artist, a woman whose fan base shifts markets, sells out stadiums, and transforms entire economies, not to another tennis player. A 20-year-old Filipino tennis player is surrounded by that degree of cultural electricity. Eala's remark perfectly encapsulated who she is when her Indian Wells debut ended in the round of 16 in March 2026. She said, "I know I belong here."